couple of thoughts on the presidential. First of all, again, we three represent and buy into conventional Washington wisdom on this. It was utterly wrong in 2016, and potentially it's wrong again this year. A couple of things that I would, so I believe that Joe Biden's probably going to be elected. That's just what I think. And however, I want to condition that strongly with two facts. First of all, Monmouth University did a poll in the battleground state of Pennsylvania, and Fox did a poll nationally in which they asked the question, who are you going to vote for? And not surprisingly, in both instances, Joe Biden won by a 7 or 8 percentage point margin. However, they added the question, who do you think your next door neighbor is going to vote for? And in both instances Trump came out ahead in terms of the total polling. The other point that I would add here is that this, according to the Political Report, in 2018, which was a fantastic turnout year, big year for Democrats retaking the House of Representatives, if you look at the base Democratic voter, which is college-educated women of all races, there were 9 million college-educated women of all races who failed to show up and vote in 2018. In 2018, if you look at the Trump base, which is frankly non-college educated white men, that he won with a 40% margin over Hillary Clinton in 2016. Among them, there were 40 million of them who were registered voters who failed to get out and show up in 2018. So every indication is that this is going to be the most record turnout in history. And I think with the passing of Justice Ginsburg is even putting more gasoline on that fire from a turnout perspective. So again, I tend to believe the polls, but I got bit before in 2016, and I wouldn't be shocked at anything occurring this year. Now, on to certain races, I think the three of us would agree on who the vulnerable ones are. The most vulnerable, so Democrats need a net of 4 seats, 3 if they win the presidency to retake the Senate. They start probably one down in that Doug Jones in Alabama is polling very poorly. And so that's one additional seat, but then it gets very tough landscape for Republicans. In no particular order, Martha McSally in Arizona, Susan Collins in Maine. She is just trapped. She takes it from the left and the right routinely. Cory Gardner in Colorado, Steve Daines in Montana, Joni Ernst in Iowa, Tom Tillis in North Carolina, and the 2 Senate seats that are up for grabs in Georgia. You could see, just because everything that can go wrong in 2020 has gone wrong, I wouldn't be shocked if we didn't have a resolution on election night, because Georgia has what's known as a jungle primary system, a jungle election in which every candidate runs at one time. And if no candidate receives 51%, there's a runoff in January. I can't even imagine the horrors of Senate control being on the line with waiting into January, but I could believe almost anything these days.
I feel like I should go because I'm going to be a lot quicker than Joel Copperrood.
Go for
it. It's funny because I just I filled out my absentee ballot yesterday. Thank you, Katie Oberkircher, for signing as a witness. And that's something too that's different than any other election. The amount of people that will be early voting, filling out absentee ballots, because it's easier than it ever was before, and the reason is because of the pandemic. And that's something that a lot of campaigns have had to make that switch. So that's kind of an interesting factor. And then you have really, really great recruits on the Republican House side. But it's also against seats that have, for our industry, friendly Democrats. And so, as someone who has worked for Republicans, I would like to see the Republican in, but the Democrats doing a great job. And that's tough. And you're always going to see that back and forth in those purple districts, those suburban, urban areas. And it's I would like to say that polls are great, but clearly we've seen that they have not been. And so I feel bad for those neighbors who have neighbors who think they're voting for Donald Trump. They must hate them, to think that. So, Joel,
we would be remiss not to acknowledge the president's recent remarks that he may not accept the outcome if he doesn't win, and that he expects this to go to the courts. So I think the presidential is very much up in the air, particularly considering all the legal challenges in every single state on the legitimacy of mail-in ballots being counted after the election. Both parties have lawyers lined up, hundreds of lawyers, probably thousands across the country, anticipating massive court fights in each state. So we know Pennsylvania is going to be a very big battle as to how they choose their electors. Is the state legislature going to choose the electors, or are the massive votes, is the popular vote going to choose the electors? That's going to be challenged in the court, probably determined by the Supreme Court. And the same will be, it's going to play out in various states all over the country because of the first time mail-in phenomenon that's happening. So that's going to have obviously a major impact on the presidential race. Nobody knows how that's going to turn out. But that will also have an impact on some of the Senate races. Also, if some of those ballots are deemed unconstitutional or can't be counted, that could be a swing to the left or the right, probably to the right. So I agree with Joel. I think that if the election were held today and if all ballots were counted, that Democrats would probably win. What the majority would look like is up in the air. But I mean, there's so many black swan moments right now. And with the latest news about the Supreme Court and all of the challenges that this is going to be tied up in the courts. And it's very unclear, I think, as to how this plays out, and probably pretty worrisome.
I mean, the markets, you think they're volatile now. They're going to keep on being volatile, and then even more, especially if we can't, if we don't have a president like a week after Election Day, and especially if we can't swear in someone by January. So it's that's what makes me nervous. And then do the American people win with this presidential election? If Trump wins, you piss off half the country. If Biden wins, you piss off half the country. I mean, maybe I'm getting like too meta for this, but it's that's just something to think about. No one's going to be happy for 4 years.
Well,
you would argue that no one's been happy for these past 4 years, but
well, I witnessed someone asking Mitt Romney shortly before the lockdown, who was very much a never Trumper Republican, who felt that they would be spending the rest of their career sort of clawing their way out of the rubble that was left by the guy. And so he said, "You're uniquely qualified, Senator Romney, to help me try to feel better, to be my therapist here." And Romney had an interesting observation. He said, Trump is Trump, and he's a unique figure in American history. And so I think much of the polarization, the partisan divide, the frankly hatred that we see going on today, I'd like to think that 2020 will be in the rearview mirror at some point. And that's not making a commentary as to, whether we are parochially better off with Donald Trump or with Joe Biden. I do worry a lot about our agenda, though, in a all Democratic environment, particularly if the legislative filibuster is gone. We haven't even addressed yet here what's going to happen to the 2017 tax law. That means basically everybody who's listening to this, your taxes are going to go up. And certainly they want to do anything over $400,000. That wouldn't be the end of the universe, but they want to lift the earnings caps on Social Security. Probably will have to do the same on Medicare. Wages, where will that corporate rate wind up being? How about the 2/3 of our member firms that are organized as pass-through entities? And we successfully, only our sector and the realtors were the only two clear winners beyond manufacturing operations. And we fought that battle real hard. And are we going to lose? Are people going to lose that? What's going to be the implications on that? Private equity took a ding, private equity fueled members, and we certainly got a lot of big ones at the council. They got, on balance, tax reform wasn't great for them, but it could have been a lot worse for them. Chuck Schumer has historically been a big supporter of private equity, but is he going to be in the environment with AOC looking over his shoulder? Hell of a lot at stake. I'm not quite as doomsday. I'd like to believe that some sanity, some civility will prevail. And frankly, the members of Congress, we are blessed to have the largest political action committee in the insurance industry, and there are more than 200 of them. And it helps, us. It's part of our currency for maintaining relationships, particularly now that we're in this virtual environment where we're zooming in with candidates for Congress, members of Congress in the House and the Senate constantly now. And we have the ability to do that with this strong political action committee. But most of the members that we're talking to are reasonable people who want to do the right thing. We support members of Congress on both sides of the political aisle. And the overwhelming majority of them, are decent people who want to, who share the same vision for the kind of America that I think most of us have. And so I'd like to think that, there's a lot of things I would propose that Congress do, eliminate this Tuesday through Thursday schedule, get to know one another, move to Washington. There's a lot of things that could make the environment better, but I am reasonably optimistic that most of the people that we support are good people of good faith, and that we'll be able to move past the environment that we're in today.
That's a better silver cloud or happy than I was feeling 5 minutes ago after I talked.
Yeah, so I've got mixed opinions about this. I agree with Joel that if it's single party rule, that there are a lot of threats before us. And they're huge, and they're going to have major implications on the markets, particularly on the benefits side. But I think about everything that we've tried to do in the past 2 years, not 4 years, just the past 2 years in divided government. And we haven't been able to get very much, if anything, accomplished because nothing has happened. There's been absolutely no bipartisanship. Blame Mitch McConnell, blame Nancy Pelosi, whatever, but they have not been able to get anything done. And the only reason we got anything done was because we put them in these behemoth packages that hinged on funding the federal government. That's how we were able to extend TRIA. That's how we were able to repeal the Cadillac tax, both of which probably would have been passed on their own in both chambers. They had the support. The Cadillac tax had over 90 senators supporting it. Why it wasn't brought up for a vote is beyond me. There's no bipartisanship. So if there is a silver lining to single party control, I do think we can get some of our measures passed that we're looking for. Measures like banning surprise medical billing, like lowering drug costs. We're looking for a short-term backstop for trade credit insurance markets right now. There's a handful of issues that are tied up in the lack of negotiations right now. And if there is a silver lining, I think that hopefully we can get some of our issues done. Now, we'll be beating back a lot of major threats in that environment, but hopefully it'll be an environment where things can actually move.
I know there's that, is it House of Cards, where there's a scene where Kevin Spacey's character forces 4 people into a room to come to an agreement on a bill. It's like we need that.
Right.
We need someone to force people to work together, and there is bipartisanship. You see it in the committees, but it's at leadership, and then as soon as the media gets a hold of it, it's we're constantly saying we support Democrats and Republicans because we support those who support our industry, and then it gets lost, and it's just it's a shame.
Right. We
work together, we really do.
Well, my favorite joke is the late great Congressman Mo Udall. In the early 70s, he ran for Democratic caucus chair, and he went to all of his colleagues, and they all told him that they would vote for him. And on secret ballot, he lost by 1 vote. And his quote that day was, "Today I've learned the difference between a cactus and a caucus. With a cactus, the pricks are on the outside."
It never gets old.